live. And once that is live, I will say a couple welcome messages to the people who are joining us via Facebook Live. It is now live. There we go. I will transition to the next lovely view that we have, which is the view of a very empty stage at the moment. All right, so welcome everybody in the Facebook world. If you guys are joining us, we have just gone live. We are still getting things set up here in VirBela. Looks like we got a couple people streaming into the room. I'm going to go where I can be seen on the live stream. There we go. So hello everyone on the Facebook Live world. Welcome. We will basically we're going to have about 15 minutes of open networking as people join in the room, and so we'll be watching here for a little bit. I see we have viewers kind of starting to jump onto Facebook Live as well. Again, the actual event will get started in about 15 minutes, but in the meantime, we'll be open networking in the room. And those of you who are on the Facebook live stream, you can join in and watch, or you can comment and say hello. We will do our best to comment with you, read your stuff into the room, things like that. But ultimately, feel free to enjoy the networking that is taking place as we get started. So we got about 15 minutes as people will stream into the open networking portion. But anyway, so Ross, what have you been so busy with besides COVID and law school classes and all that fun stuff?
Oh, so lately it's been fun working with some of my clients because it's always busy in video game and tech entrepreneurship, but the last 6 months especially, I used to get one phone call a quarter about crypto or NFTs, and now it's 100.
Oh yeah.
That's the new buzzword. A couple of years ago, it was like, so I heard that blockchain could be used for money. And now it's all NFT and, NFTs and crypto stuff. So it's been fun, talking with folks about those sometimes blurry lines and sometimes bright lines between copyrights and NFTs and finding interesting ways to monetize things. But what's been exciting for me is that a lot of my clients tend to be small entrepreneurs or indie devs with day jobs. So the last couple of years has given them a lot of time to moonlight. So I'm seeing a lot of passion projects and kind of dream products get built. So whether those are at-home arcades or new mobile apps or new ways to make use of all these quests that people have, all these VR headsets that they have at home, because now we can buy rigs again that can run VR. It's lots of discussions about how to monetize those, how to find the connections to network those, or how to design the software in particular. So it's definitely been pushing the edges of my skill sets, advising folks as counsel.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, I dig it. No, I'm excited to meet everyone on the panel tonight. Walter, I saw you are doing some really interesting stuff. And are you talking about NFTs tonight?
I will not be talking about NFTs. I'm going to be talking about the presentation of evidence and how it might look when we're doing it virtually, when we're doing it in the metaverse.
Oh, very cool.
But yeah, no, I'm bullish on the metaverse. I work with a whole bunch of folks that are building stuff, everything from theater experiences to fitness experiences to a comedy club in VR. So I'm super excited to see, as you say, what people are thinking of with all these headsets that we've gotten our hands on, and the fact that we can actually now get a hold of a nice high-end graphics card.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you're touching on tonight. Being from Chicago, I'm a huge fan of improv and stand-up comedy in general. So seeing how this technology is being leveraged to do those things and kind of pushing the limits of it, that's really exciting.
Oh, then yeah, I think then you'll dig it. Something I talk about a lot in talking about trial practice and trial techniques. I mean, a lot of the same ideas apply to theater, So you're talking about things like staging, blocking, being aware of what you're doing in the space, being aware of what you're conveying in the space. I find it super fascinating.
Oh, definitely. Oh, that's super fun. I've been doing transactional law for so long. It's been a while since trial ad and, working on my blocking and court demeanor. But I'm sure as complicated as all that is in real life, I can only imagine new difficulties coming along in VR and kind of using that to your advantage when you can master the tech.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly it, right? He who masters the tools, something. I don't know if I actually know the rest of that adage, but Just being familiar with what's in the toolbox so that, you can use it when hopefully you have the opportunity. But I'll hint at that a little more.
Very cool. Yeah, I don't want to, no spoilers for everyone in the room who might be listening. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, we've got people saying hello on the Facebook live stream, so there are definitely people, more than people in the room who are listening. So I'll say hello to Francis and Sophia, who are the two who have at least commented on Facebook so far. I see that there's a couple of the viewers, but they haven't said hello yet, so we'll leave them alone for now.
Very cool.
Andrea is here. We got Andrea finally into VirBela, and she's going to be speaking about NFTs. And then Gwen, I think, is AFK maybe still, but the other two panelists are right here hanging out at the entrance.
Excellent. Oh, I saw Gwen move finally, so I don't think she's AFK.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not sure where you want me to go. Hi, guys.
That's okay. We'll come up towards the stage once the event gets started. For now, we can just sort of mill around and do whatever we want. That's the joy of the open networking at the beginning. I'm staying up on the stage where people in the Facebook Live can at least see my avatar, because this is, there's a camera view kind of floating above the stage that only really points towards the stage. So for the live stream, they get to see what's happening on the stage, but they can't really see everybody else in the rest of the room. And the viewer, there we go.
I'm going to try and be as present as I can be. I'm going to try and have the Facebook open as well as VirBela, so I can see comments and questions. And
yeah, what I do just, again, as I've done this for a while, we've done this for 2 years now. And so what I'll do is, as we get to the Q&A portion, when people question, they send comments by the feed on Facebook, I'll actually read them in the room.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you won't have to worry about monitoring both. I'll be monitoring both.
Beautiful.
But feel free to watch if you'd like to. Other than that, we still have a couple more minutes just to get started. About a good 8 minutes.
Is there someone somewhere you want us to stand or sit or just hang out where I am?
Yeah. So when we get the actual presentation started, because I'm assuming we'll have some more people mill into the room itself. So the presenters, there's kind of 4 chairs up on the stage area. And the 4 of you will just sort of take those 4 chairs and, one at a time, you guys will come up to the center where I'm standing right about now and present. And I'll sort of just go off to the side and disappear. But yeah, that's what'll happen. So during the actual event, the 4 presenters will be sitting in the chairs up on stage. Everybody in the audience, I'll put audience seating in place. And then, just keep in mind that we do have people, in addition to the people in the room that are watching, that you're interacting with, there will also be people watching on the live stream. And actually, at this point, we have a lot of people watching on the live stream. The live stream's kicking up pretty heavily right now. There's actually more people on the live stream than are in the room. So I'll say hello to Leslie and Matt, who also joined. And I see Ross has decided to join the live stream or the Facebook stream as well, because he's commenting there, and he's also in the room. So there we go. Leslie and Matt. Awesome. I messaged, and as Tom, I was going to say, I messaged Cam to see if he would be coming to VirBela when we get started, but I have not heard a response yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Other than that, I was going to say, Ross, I'm trying to remember how long it's been since we've actually seen each other in person. I think it's approaching 3 years at this point. It's a weird thing to think about. Why is it not letting me walk in VirBela right now? There we go.
I was on mute. Yeah, I think it was about 3 years ago. I think we were probably down at 2112 in the before times in the long ago.
No, it's so weird.
Isn't it funny?
The one thing that we can say, which I can actually say, I believe we can actually say definitively this time, is that we are getting back to in-person. We will be doing in-person in August. So it'll be hybrid. We'll have a hybrid online version as well. But we will actually be doing an in-person event at 1871. First time in over 2 years.
Yeah, with some food and some drink and some socializing, some demonstrations. It's going to be great.
Exciting.
We may have some other pretty cool announcements too, but I can't quite announce them yet. So unfortunately. But stuff in progress, which is really good. Anyway, we see more people kind of filtering into the room. We got some of that. Let's see what else we have. I was gonna say, Tom, I don't know if we have people, if you want to maybe jump over at some point to the conference hall and make sure people are not going into there. Cause
Yeah.
you know, I did by accident, so.
Yeah, sure. How did you get there?
Same, so basically just go to Pavilion and then main conference hall.
Okay, got it. Cool. Yeah, I'll go check it out. Yeah, I've changed all the language on our things to community hall, but I'll go double check.
Awesome. And I see Sophia in the room. Hello, Sophia.
Hi, how are
Hey.
you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
And so do you guys have in person? Is this a hybrid thing? Or
So today is just online, but next month in August, we are going to actually get back into in person in Chicago.
Awesome.
So we will still do online. So we will still have the VirBela room going as well. But, you know, there will be an actual main event, live event going on.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
Andrea, are you there? Do we still have you, Andrea?
Right.
I love this platform. I still can't get over how cool this is. Like, if little me knew someday I'd be talking about law and VR in VR.
I know, right?
Can't beat it, man. This is the most meta thing ever.
Isn't it though?
Cool.
Well, and then you've got the Facebook stream going, so like you can see yourself on the Facebook stream moving around in the VR while you're watching them both in real life. Like, that's fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when it comes down to it, this is like, if we go way back when we started this event, so back in 2017, I want to say it was like the third or fourth event, that somebody, you know, we were at FinTank's office, actually, of all places, and somebody kind of came to me and they're like, you know, you can't do everything in VR. VR can't do everything. It's not like you could host this event from VR. And I'm like, okay, bet. Let's go. So the next month,
Challenge
the next month I hosted the event. That there was a physical event that took place in FinTank's office. I was not physically there. I hosted it from my basement using, at the time, Facebook, the Facebook, whatever that little platform was. I don't remember what it was, where they had like the table with the 4 seats. Gone now, but it was definitely like pre-Horizon. But I actually hosted the event from VR. And so I was not physically there. And it was like, all right, well, you know, next time somebody tries to tell you can't do something in VR, it's like, well, let's go. And then, of course, as soon as the pandemic hit, we obviously had to do this in VR. So, but
I mean, it was great that we had the tools, though, because we were already ready to hit the ground running when that happened. I remember on whatever Tuesday that was when I mean, my law practice was always virtual, but I also teach at DePaul. And when they told us you're teaching from the home, I was like, all right, let's do it. I already have the technology, I have the tools, I have the experience, let's make it happen. And we really didn't miss a beat. We just kind of rolled through.
yeah, I remember, you know, I used to go in and I would generally do one session kind of per semester or trimester, whatever it was, for DePaul, for Bree McEwen's class, the communications class. She would always have me come in and just do one presentation day every time she had the class. And then, of course, pandemic, it's like, all right, well, she's like, hey, would you mind doing it in Vives, you know, whatever the Vive environment was. I can't remember what that was at the time. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you know, no problem. It's like the one thing I have, you know, kind of a lot of experience in is working in the VR. So for me, it's not even hard to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun, though.
Definitely.
I actually got to see her. We were at Collision in Toronto just 2 weeks ago. And so I got to run into Bree because she's actually teaching at the University of Toronto now.
Oh, cool.
So that was fun. Got her ticket. I let her use one of our company tickets to Collision, so she came in for a day and actually hung out. It was great. But we are about a minute away from getting started. And so what I'm going to ask our presenters to do at this point is if you guys would all just kind of come up and take a seat in one of the white chairs. What I will then do is add some seating to the audience as so. And then for those of you who are in the audience, please take a chair in the audience section.
Matt,
I'm sure
being recorded?
This will be, so we're streaming to Facebook, so it auto records.
Okay.
But I do actually have a couple, just in case, I have a couple secondary recordings happening also.
Awesome.
We officially kick off at 6:15. We do this every time. We see people sort of stream in and out of the room itself as time goes on. I can see there's a couple people in the room who are here, but not here at the moment. But we'll get started because that's what we always do. So for those of you who are here, the one thing that I do, again, kind of a little bit as a practice. So Russ and Walter, I'm going to ask you guys if you don't mind muting your microphones until it's time for you guys to present. That avoids any sort of audio feedback, although I haven't been getting any thus far. There we go. I saw Steven just move away from his little side chair to a table at this point. But anyway, this is VRAR Chicago. This is an event that has been going on monthly for over 5 years at this point. Obviously, since the pandemic started, we have been doing it 100% virtually. We started in Allspace. We have been in VirBela for close to 2 years at this point. I believe this is actually exactly the 2-year anniversary in VirBela, which also makes it the perfect day for us to announce publicly and with finality this time that we are getting back to in-person events next month. So there will be an in-person VRAR Chicago taking place at the 1871 Auditorium next month, which will be the first time in, I believe, 27 months that we've actually gotten together in person. So this will be great to get back. That said, we will be hybriding the event, so there will be a virtual portion of it. Details to follow on the VRARchicago.com website. So keep up with us there for those of you who watch the stream later or are watching live now. That's what will be happening next month. I would be remiss in saying that we could do this event without the assistance of our sponsors that have been supporting us all the way along for several years. So first, I would like to thank our sponsors, Bundle AR 1871 and VirBela. And it looks like I have Anthony in the room from Bundle AR, so I will let him come up and do that introduction. So Anthony, want to join me up here and intro Bundle AR?
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well tonight. My name is Anthony Colon and I am the marketing coordinator at Bundle AR. Just to give you all a brief background of who we are and what we do, Bundle AR is an augmented reality company based out of Chicago, and we've created a web-based AR platform that lets our users design, publish, and access augmented reality experiences without having to write a single line of code. We think that AR is changing everything, and our goal is to try to make this technology as accessible as possible. And our team has been really hard at work trying to optimize our platform, so people like me who have no coding experience can now design and publish their own custom AR. And we do have a quick video here, just so you can all get a little more background on who we are and what we do, if you'd like to play that, Matt.
Until now, creating augmented reality was hard. IT departments simply do not have the expertise, so they rely on expensive developers and one-off solutions. Introducing Bundle AR's augmented reality platform. Bundle AR's revolutionary, self-serve augmented reality content management system allows anyone, anywhere, to easily create, edit, and deploy augmented reality to Apple and Google devices instantly and on a global scale. Now is the time to add on-demand, accurate, and trusted digital information to your communications through a tool nearly everybody already has, their smartphone. Perfect for just-in-time immersive training, learning, and development programs. Easily place multimedia content like videos or interactive 3D models on real-world items like signage, brochures, or packaging to enhance your audience's understanding of your product, procedures, or story. No special equipment or coding skills necessary. It's augmented reality made easy. Visit bundlear.com now to get started.
Thank you, Matt. So as you guys can see, the applications for augmented reality are only really limited by your imagination. And if any of you guys would like to know more, I'll be sticking around for a little bit. And please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or contact us at info@bundlear.com. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Anthony. All right. Our next sponsor, who does not have any representation in the room this evening, is 1871, which is Chicago's technology incubator. There are, I want to say, approximately 400 companies that are based out of 1871. 1871 is a physical space located in the Merchandise Mart. They have also expanded well beyond their physical space and now have their own virtual campus, which frankly VRAR Chicago actually helped them initiate. So they do have a worldwide audience. I was actually present with 1871 at Collision Conference in Toronto about 2 weeks ago. But ultimately, if you are a technology company and you are based in or around the Chicago area, or frankly, if you have any ties to the Chicago area, you have customers you're looking to attract in the Chicago area, things like that, I would definitely encourage anybody to contact 1871 because they do help companies at all stages of growth, whether you're, just at the idea stage and learning what you need to launch your company, or if you are, getting just beyond the launch phase and getting off the ground. There's programs for everybody there, from mentorship to help with funding to helping with business structure and getting law in place, getting legal representation in space, getting insurance in space. Pretty much everything you would need to help get, a company that is going to either get off the ground or launch or scale, or even in the, in the large commercial phase of life, and you're actually looking to connect more with innovative new technology companies. But beyond that, our final sponsor that I will recognize today is VirBela, which is frankly the platform that we are sitting in right now. VirBela kind of joined and jumped on the platform with us early on when we went into the virtual space. Once we had to transition to completely virtual, they actually reached out to us and said, hey, we've got a really good sort of office virtual events environment that we think you guys would benefit from making use of. And we have definitely found benefit there. VRAR Chicago as a corporation has never actually had a physical office. We have only ever had a virtual office in VirBela, and we've been hosting this event now for approximately 2 years in the VirBela platform. It's the space that we're all sitting in right now. It is a great platform with a lot of tools, and that is VirBela. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them because we've been making, I will say, we've been making very good use of this technology at this point for over 2 years. We also definitely want to thank our partners who sort of help us cross-promote and find speakers and present. And we've actually got representation from a couple of these organizations in the room today. So 2112 is Chicago's Creative Entrepreneurship Center. XR Women, who is just an awesome community in the XR community, both for, not just for women alone, but for growing the technology across the ecosystem. The Independent Game Developers Association of Chicago, who's also represented by one of our presenters this evening, us, and VR Motion Learning. We do want to thank our partners for, again, helping us cross-promote, helping us locate speakers, and helping us just grow the entire ecosystem across the board. But with that, we do want to get to the topic of the day. So what I will do now is I will first start by asking the question that I always do. For those of you who are in the room, there should be a little button in the bottom center of your screen in VirBela. Please, if you have ever been to a VRAR Chicago event in the past, raise your hand. All right, and you can put your hand down. If you have never previously been to a VRAR Chicago event, please raise your hand now. Walter, I see on this. All right, and I see a couple of you who didn't raise your hand. But the reason I always do that to practice this at the very beginning of the event is because when we do get to the Q&A portion at the end of the event, what we're going to do is we're going to ask people to raise their hands. That's how you get recognized to be able to ask questions. For those of you who are joining us on the Facebook live stream, you can just simply type questions in the chat, and we will read them into the room for those of us in the room so that we don't, kind of overstep on each other. What we'll do is we'll ask you to raise your hand. I will recognize you. At that point, you will be able to open your microphone and ask your question, remute yourself, and we'll let the panel answer. But the way the format of this event works, because, for those of you who have not been to a VRAR Chicago event, the whole purpose of the event is our audience. We are not here to sell you on whatever our particular companies sell. We're not here to, sell services to you or legal advice or anything that we do. Ultimately, the point here is for our audience to be able to get their questions answered and take whatever the next step forward is that they need to take towards using immersive technology. So what we do is every month we pick an industry topic. We bring up some experts related to that industry topic in immersive technology, and they're going to present very briefly on themselves, what they do, what their area of expertise is, just so that you know what questions you can get answered by those people. And we have a bunch of different people from the legal profession who are on our panel today. This is, I can't remember if this is actually the third or the fourth time that we have presented law as a topic. We have done law kind of a bunch of different ways. I think the first time we did it, it was very much around, if you're an immersive technology company, what do you need to know from a legal standpoint? So there was a lot of expertise on intellectual property and just starting a business and some of the legal aspects of technology companies. I think the second time we did law, we focused very heavily on what are some of the big kind of important cases that have taken place. I know we talked about the Niantic, the lawsuit with Pokemon Go up at the park in Wisconsin. And this time around, what we're doing is we've kind of changed it up a little bit. We're saying, hey, listen, if you're in the legal profession, what do you really need to understand about this technology? How is this going to affect your clients? How is this going to affect your cases? How is this going to affect your profession going forward? So while this is I think the third time that we've done law as a topic, we're definitely approaching it every single time as a different aspect. And that's what we like to do. We want to help people get their questions answered. That's also why we record this event, and the recording of the live stream will be available forever on our Facebook Live page and linked from the web page. We will ask once again, if you're not already a fan and following our socials, please do. Our socials are all listed on the slides to the side of, center screen right now, where we have VRAR Chicago for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and of course we have our Discord channel. But at that point, I will stop talking and I will introduce our first presenter of the evening, who is a repeat multi-time repeat presenter for VRAR Chicago, Ross Hirschman. You want to join me up here, Ross? Where is Ross? Ross is over to my right, I believe.
Right here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Please come and join me at the center stage, because what I am going to do is I'm actually going to present the slides on sort of a picture-in-picture for the web screen. So if you're not standing at the center of the screen, you might get covered. But all yours, take it away.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you to VRAR Chicago and all of our amazing sponsors and partners here for the invitation. And I'm always so pleased to talk with everyone who's here. Can you give me just a quick heads up how many minutes I have? Because when it comes to a speed run, I always want to know how much scope can I scale what I have to say for our folks in the audience.
I'll say if you go between 8 and 10 minutes, you're good.
Fantastic. Lawyers think in minutes, just like stand-up comedians and everyone else. But in the time that we have here, I think what would be really beneficial for everyone is what I always like to start with a group like this is I always like to start with just a little bit of a primer, not just of what I do, but also of what aspects of law apply to these developing technologies. And I think whether you're a law student in the crowd or someone who's developing technology as a game developer or a tech entrepreneur or a legal practitioner who's been in the game for 20 years, these are the kinds of things that you'll need to know. And I think where a lot of us get started, well, before I jump into that, I'll say quickly about myself. My name is Ross Hirschman, and I'm the founding partner of Loading Law, a law practice from Chicago, Illinois that caters to the needs of tech entrepreneurs and game developers specifically. And a majority of my clients do work in AR, VR, and other competing technologies. Aside from that, I also lecture at DePaul University, where I talk about legal issues in games, as well as public speaking, communications, and developing technologies. So you can see all of this is very near and dear to my heart and very much part of my skill set. So when it comes to whether you're a law student, whether you're a game developer, probably the first legal issues you're going to be touching and concerning when you're working with AR, XR, VR, probably some kind of intellectual property. You're going to start concerning yourself with copyright, trademarks, patents, and trade secrets. Brief introduction for all of that is that copyrights are original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression. What that means in technology circles or as they apply to video games and VR is that that's going to be the video, the audio, the creative expressions of creative content in your app, in your game. So if you're creating some cool characters or some cool music or some written words, all of that is going to be protected by copyright. And to make sure that you're creating original things that are protected, not infringing on anyone else's, you're probably going to be looking for some copyright registrations to protect those rights, to protect your creativity, and also to make sure you're not stepping on anyone else's. Following that, trademarks is another aspect of the law that protects a lot of the content in games. Trademarks, in a nutshell, protect brands and brand indicators. indicators of source of goods or services of a particular quality. So the name of your game or the name of your company might be protected by a trademark. The logo that you use to advertise your game, your services, your app, your company would be protected by a trademark. But it's also important to keep trademarks in mind when you're creating virtual worlds, creating new digital content, because as tempting as it might be to create a very authentic, realistic virtual reality, including everything from Coke cans on tables to your favorite game console controllers, depending on how realistic you might make some of those representations, you might find yourself running afoul of some trademark infringement claims. If there are other companies out there in the world who are not a fan that their content, their brands, their logos are being included in your experience. So sometimes that means a little bit of due diligence and a little bit of careful design or careful law practice to make sure you're not rubbing anyone the wrong way with your content creation. And of course, another kind of intellectual property that I'm sure is very familiar to many of the tech folks in the room would be patents. Patents protecting machinations or inventions, mechanical processes, software, code, sometimes even design. This is something that's always coming up in developing technologies, running the actual hardware, but also sometimes the stylistic representations of the hardware themselves can be a big part of patents. So together, copyright, trademarks, and patents are the forms of intellectual property that are probably going to be of the most concern to both developers and practitioners getting into video games. I get reached out to by a lot of law students, and they routinely ask, what do I need to be studying? What do I need to be practicing? What do I need to be knowing to get into the video game space, whether it's esports or AR or VR? And I always say IP is usually where it starts, but it is by no means comprehensive. And some of the other things you'll be focusing on, especially in virtual worlds, is going to be privacy. Privacy law is the new hot topic. There's always a new hot topic for game development, and privacy is going to be covering not just chat messages that people are sharing within your virtual world. It's not just the data you're collecting from your users, from your folks who are engaging and interacting with your virtual world, but it's also representations or characterizations of avatars within that world. So if your avatar looks a little bit too much like a famous celebrity, or if you're including a likeness of a famous building or a variety of other things, privacy law can be very important for right of publicity purposes in terms of your game. And I think this is the last bit of legalese I'll throw at you before I start talking about some practical applications of all these things, is how important contracts can be. One of the things that is a real nuance to my law practice and some of the work I do with my game developers is how some of the legal protections that apply to this innovative technology are just as innovative. We are trying to find new and progressive ways to protect creative expression and interaction in virtual worlds. So as a lawyer, it means thinking creatively and trying to look into your magic 8-ball and foresee every potential eventuality of how someone might use your technology positively or negatively. And we try to apply the law as written wherever possible, but where the law is as yet unwritten or unimagined, we try to govern our online interactions, our privacy, our safety through contracts whenever possible. So putting together those terms of service, putting together those end user license agreements, and finding good progressive ethical partners to work with, and making sure that the paper accurately represents the principle that people are sharing, very important part of being a video game lawyer. So in innovative industries like virtual reality, you have to think outside the box a little bit. So my game developers will often ask me questions of, okay, we want to protect this creative expression, or we want to protect this idea. How do we do it? Well, simply, we're probably throwing copyrights at it. We're throwing trademarks at it. Sometimes we're throwing patents at it. But beyond that, thinking creatively, like, we've developed a VR AR experience. It's probably going to be on a VR headset. For those who don't have their own VR headsets, they might be experiencing it in a VR lounge or arcade or public place, which means as an attorney, I have to think creatively and say, well, we're not going to be monetizing this product, this app, this technology just by selling a game for $60 to the consumer. We might be licensing it to a business like an arcade, like a VR lounge, like a virtual experience. And because of that, we might have to change our business model a little bit. We might need to use some commercial licenses, and that might require us to take on some additional responsibilities or liabilities. So that changes the way that we handle things like insurance, because if people are playing VR games in VR lounges where there might be alcohol, or where there might just be a good old-fashioned slip and fall case, we have to make sure that those people are protected, the proper insurance is carried so that no one gets hurt and that everyone is kept safe, but that also our design principles are also keeping people safe. I always say to my game developers, are you employing a mechanic in your product that's making them walk in a certain way or move in a certain way that might cause them harm? Is this mechanic that's making them walk or jump or break dance, whatever the movement is, however it applies to the game world, what are the real world implications of how this might make people move? Will this put them in danger? Will this harm them in some way? You can quickly see how complicated simple things can get. But that's one of the reasons that I got into this industry, because I enjoy working with progressive, intriguing technologies that are always changing, always evolving, and the law is always trying to catch up to them. And I use that kind of as my preface for today with the couple minutes that I've had here. Not so much to just be a fast primer on this, but to kind of get everyone's minds thinking, get your mental gears turning about what kind of questions you might have about if you have an app, if you have a law practice, if you have a general question about what the current state of technology is, what the current state of the law is, and where those two meet, or sometimes more interestingly, where they don't meet, where they don't see eye to eye. That's what myself and that's what the rest of our panelists are here to answer. We're here to kind of fill in some of those gaps and opine on if the law isn't quite where it needs to be, where it should go, and how quickly it's going to get there. So with that is my preamble for everything else today. I'm going to turn it over to our other presenters, and we're going to kick this thing off. So I look forward to your questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Ross. All right. Oh, see, and I just saw Jay had asked a question on Facebook that was kind of funny about, I think he was commenting about your IP related commentary where he said, is the hedgehog fast and blue in your game? Which, depending on the situation, I guess that could be a trademark or copyright infringement. There we go. He just reloaded it.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I think he reloaded it as a question to yours. But we'll get to those types of questions because those are actually good questions. And actually, when you were talking about trademark, that left me with a question that I'm going to ask you later on when we get to the Q&A section. But before we get to that, we do have a couple more presenters, and we will start with Walter McMath. And I will go with the most interesting thing I learned about Walter today is that it's his birthday. So happy birthday, Walter, first of all. And come and please join me here at center stage and start presenting.
All right. Hey,
I won't ask the embarrassing question of how old are you, but I'll say happy birthday and leave it.
Thank you very much. And if you did ask that question, I'm pretty sure I'd have to say something like objection relevance, but I don't know. Maybe you could overrule that. I'm not sure what jurisdiction we're in here. So, hey guys, I'm gonna be talking to you about, well, I guess first I'll give you a little bit about myself. So, I am a trial attorney. I have been a trial attorney for the majority of my practice, which is coming up on now about 14 years. And in that capacity, I've tried something like dozens of cases, both criminal and civil, and tend to use the most cutting-edge presentation technology I can get a hold of. I got my first VR headset just last year, and so that was when I made a pivot over into the VR industry. So I started to do some general counsel work and talk to various VR developers about how I could be of service to them. I'm going to take a phrase from Ross's book just now. He used the phrase, making sure the paper represents the principle, and I think that's just beautiful. Just the idea of making sure that the idea that's in our heads about what this partnership is going to be matches what we're putting down on paper in the record about what we're going to do. So let me switch gears a little bit to what I want to talk to you about, which is what the presentation of evidence and what evidence advocacy generally might look like in the metaverse. Okay, so what is evidence? Generally speaking, evidence is going to be photos, it's going to be maps, it's going to be witness testimony, perhaps the testimony of one of the parties. Generally speaking, it's whatever you think is going to help prove your side of the case. In this day and age, it's going to include scientific evidence. As every new technology comes up, sooner or later, the courts are going to have to answer the question of, is this something that we're going to admit? Is this something that's going to have value for a finder of fact, for a jury? And when those questions get asked, we want to make sure that we're ready to ask them and that the people making the decisions have all the information that they need. So, what are some examples? I mean, witness testimony, say, like, can I imagine putting somebody into an avatar and then allowing them to testify in a virtual courtroom? I can. But then maybe you're going to run into issues with the confrontation clause, and then maybe that's going to prevent you from legally doing it. On the other hand, what about something simpler? What about some demonstrative evidence? If, for example, you take a drone and fly it around a crime scene, and then you use that to create a 3D mesh, which you go ahead and load into a shared VR experience for people to look at. Now, is that something that has evidentiary value? Is that something that a judge should consider letting in? My argument's obviously going to be yes, but the bottom line is we're going to have to understand the arguments either way if that's what we want to advocate for. But that said, I think that once we are successful in admitting virtual evidence, then the floodgates are going to open. Next slide, please. Okay, so why would we want to admit evidence in VR? Why is this something we'd even want to do? Well, there's a couple of reasons. For one, human psychology just kind of works in a certain way. People will remember about 90% of what they say throughout the course of a day, but they're only going to remember about 10% of what you say. That's just a fact. And so if you want to drive that number up, there are certain things that you can do in order to make your presentation land a little bit better. Something that you can do is, you'll see that I'm not going to put any more than 3 bullet points in front of you at a time. I don't want to overwhelm you guys. I want to give you guys something nice and simple to look at while I'm talking to you. You might have noticed that I have a habit of moving from one spot to another when I'm changing topics. That's another good way to reset people's attention spans. And as applies to this context, if you can show people something like a photograph, that always is good to reset their attention spans. And if you can take it a little bit further and show them something really immersive, then that's just going to be all that much more memorable for what you're trying to show them. And remember, when you're talking about a jury, when you're talking about a finder of fact, when they're in the jury room deliberating, they're going to be there without you. So whatever you can kind of incept into their minds, that's what they're going to be working with. Okay, so those are some psychological arguments for it, but practically, why would we want to consider doing this? So the photo here, this is me in June of 2020, and I was actually in the middle of a trial in March 2020. I literally showed up to a courthouse on March 17th, 2020, thinking that I was going to put a witness on the stand and we were going to finish trying this case, which only required about 2 days of evidence. And the judge says to me, no, we're all going home. And apparently there's this pandemic on. I don't know. You guys may have heard of it. I'm hearing it was apparently a big deal. So the thing about this was we only had 2 days of evidence left, and I actually had to fight tooth and nail to get us back into a courtroom. And so what you can see here is this is me with my my mask, and I would usually not wear a mask in court, and I would usually have all sorts of tools at my disposal, like walking around the room and making big gestures in order to relate to people. But in this particular instance, I was standing at a podium. I had to present evidence through a Zoom equivalent, and I actually had to stand with a plastic enclosure on all sides of me. So long story short, I was forced to be comfortable with virtual means of presentation in a trial setting where usually my preference would be to do it in person. And so what I'm saying is certain practical considerations may come into play where it makes sense for us to consider virtual proceedings or virtual presentation of evidence, even though it's maybe not the first thing that we would think of or is something that we've historically done. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about what evidence is, and we've talked about why you would want to present it virtually. Now, how are you going to do it? Now, obviously, every jurisdiction is different, and obviously, every case is different, but I think that these are some general observations that will hold. One, you want to choose the right case and the right judge. If you have a case that, for example, is a simple petty theft, and you tell the judge, yes, Your Honor, and I'm going to put headsets on all of these people and I'm going to bring them into the grocery store. You know, for a 6-month misdemeanor, that may not necessarily be the kind of thing that a judge wants to entertain. On the other hand, maybe you have a murder case or something very serious, and this is an accurate and precise way to let the jurors see the area where this is purported to have happened. And maybe that information is really of use to them. So you don't want to try to just shoehorn it in on any case just because it seems cool. You want to have a really good conversation with yourself about if this is the case and why. On the second point about probative value, simply put, the judge isn't going to let it in just for the sake of letting it in. You have to be prepared to make a strong argument that what you want to present is going to be of assistance to the finder of fact. It's going to help the jury do their job. And also, you need to assure the judge that there's no other reason that's more, has more gravity that's going to keep it out. For example, are these pictures that are going to shock the conscience, or is this something that's ultimately just going to be a waste of time because it's going to take longer to make the technology work than the 20 seconds we're going to be in the experience? It's worth sitting down and thinking these things out because ultimately you're going to have to convince the person in the black robe. Third point, the judge should retain control. This is kind of a no-brainer. Generally speaking, the court system kind of runs on the concept that the judge gets to maintain control of their courtroom, and for the most part, we're going to give deference to them in terms of the rulings that they make and how they run things. So think about, for example, you want to create a shared experience, and you want to make sure that the judge has some level of admin control so that, you know, that's not an argument against him hopefully letting in whatever it is that you want to show. Finally, the jury should be simultaneously present. Again, everything that a jury does, they have to do together. And so they get sworn together, they will enter the box at the same time, they will leave at the same time, they will not deliberate unless they're all present together. They'll have lunch together. They kind of become this little micro community for a bit. And so by the same token, if one is going to be building a virtual reality or augmented reality experience that they hopefully wish to admit into evidence, I think it's going to be of paramount importance that it be something that everybody can experience at the same time, just to pass muster under the various procedural rules that apply in court. So overall, that would be my summary of what VR evidence would consist of and why you would want to present it, and also some of the challenges that you might encounter if you were seeking to do such a thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Walter. That is a lot of information packed into a very short time frame. I've got about 1,000 questions. But we'll get to that. All right. Up next, we have Gwen Hickman joining us. And Gwen, I will ask you to join me here center stage. I will notice, I kind of noticed before you even said that you were doing it, Walter, that you were actually moving around the area more than most people do in the virtual environments. It's one of those things that, normally a lot of us, when we present, we walk around. And it's something that I guess a lot of people sort of forget to do in a virtual environment, myself included, quite often. But I see that Gwendolyn has joined me. Thank you very much. I will wait to hear your voice and know that you're not muted, and then I will go disappear off the side.
I am unmuted. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Hello to all.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, well, hello, Sophia. I work in the traditional realm of law where harm caused by a bad actor or negligent actor has resulted in a physical injury to the person. For example, you can see that in criminal law, an assault and battery has physically injured a person, or a negligent driver or business has acted in a harmful way to cause an injury to the person. I myself am a lawyer. I'm the president of Hickman Law Office in Old Town, Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm licensed to practice in Virginia, Maryland, DC, and some federal courts. We practice criminal law and personal injury, that is, injuries to the person caused by some other person's fault. We try cases before a jury, negotiate and settle disputes. Then, enter the world of meta. I was introduced to meta through my daughter, Sophia Moshasha, who works in immersive technology that covers AR, VR. We would talk about her experiences, and then she actually put me into a headset. And I entered this brave new world called metaverse. I could see and hear, and I was submerged into this space and removed from my real world senses, and it piqued my interest. A lot of resources are expended on controlling bad actors or perceived bad actors. And much like our real world, the question is how to control and punish those bad actors. What and how should platforms censor bad actors while still affording due process rights? You all know that Facebook and Twitter suspend accounts temporarily or on a permanent basis based on their judgment alone, not the judgment of a jury. But is that really fair? And is that a trend that the metaverse should follow? Or is it fundamentally fair to permit the alleged offender to have their day in court, so to speak, in a VR court? In the metaverse, the avatar is a much more sophisticated virtual identity with more complex interactions and integrations with our real life. Therefore, censorship of an avatar will have a much greater impact than a Facebook profile. Who is the judge? And what are the rules? If the rules are not fair, then people will not want to interact in the metaverse. Let's explore a few hot topics. Crime in the metaverse. Think about an avatar screaming next to you in the meta so as to interfere with your presence to engage in whatever activity you are there for. Or having a nude avatar suddenly appear you and follow you around. Some traditional crimes in person, misconduct such as assault and battery, like a fist fight in a real bar, result in a crime. You've touched the person unlawfully. But that does not hold true, that type of crime in metaverse. However, you can see and be heard in meta. An example of a crime in both the real and meta world is being so loud as to disturb the peace. Or how about indecent exposure where the avatar is naked? Potential solutions for that bad conduct would be to have the platforms keep good logs to know which avatar was screaming or offending. Maybe the platforms may require identification of people with the use of their credit card. Maybe we can subpoena to track the internet subscriber. Maybe we need VR police, or implement codes to allow the user to ramp down the noise, or enable the user to change how other avatars appear to them, or flick them off the screen, or limit how close an avatar can actually get to you. Another topic area are other physical injuries. For example, if the headsets are designed to remove the user from the real world with noise canceling capabilities and sight restrictions, then potential injuries can occur despite warnings. The user is unable to capture their actual real surroundings and may forget where they are and simply not notice the danger in front of them. For example, from the use of headsets, resulting in the user may bump into objects, causing broken bones and injuries to spectators who get too close. Failure to notice hazards nearby in the real world. Being forgetful of the real world, for example, attempting to climb onto an elevated surface only to fall because the surface doesn't really exist in the real world. Examples of real injuries: broken bones, lacerations, eye strain, disorientation, muscle strains, tears, concussions, stepping on piercing objects like broken glass, vision damage, electric shock, and seizures. So then you have to figure out who is at fault. Perhaps the user, if the user is negligent in the use of the headset. Perhaps the headset is faulty due to design or manufacturer error. Or perhaps the source of the images is the cause of the injury. Potential solutions may include safety regulations, warning, and education. Use the headset in a large, clear area. Set an alarm to alert you to remove the headset and take in your surroundings ever so often. Or maybe even buying special insurance coverage. Lastly, there is a very growing concern about privacy. Remember that your moves are being captured, so be aware of your conduct and your digital footprint. Review your platform services user agreements. For example, business done on their platform, does it belong to them? Or what if they then own your avatar? Know the rules and the risks of the particular platform. In other words, review the terms of the contract to know how the platform the user is interacting with operates regarding data and privacy. Remember, there is a group that has administrative privileges and can control the environment. Possible solutions: third-party authentication services, ask to see their credentials, and lastly, assume that all of what you do is being recorded and or watched. So be very careful with your discussions and interactions. That's it, folks. That's a wrap. It was a pleasure to be present and share my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. That is, again, just a ton of information. So thank you, Gwen. I do have a lot of questions for you too. Again, some of these questions are coming out. These are, a lot of the stuff that you brought up are things that we've talked about at previous legal events. And ultimately, what's interesting about it is how much the answers have changed over the last couple of years as VR and AR use have become much more common, much more popular. The question of always like, hey, who's at fault if you get injured while you're wearing a VR headset? Who's at fault? Is it the headset manufacturer? Is it you? Is it the game manufacturer? It's those are all the types of questions that come up constantly. And actually, I'll speak to it a little bit more, but like those are the things that we talk about when we're writing safety standards right now. But before we get to that, we have one more person who's going to bring us into the world of all these brand new technologies, things like NFTs and the metaverse itself, and that is Andrea. Andrea, can you come and join me here?
Yes. Am I there?
I see you sitting on a chair still, so ideally if you can come and join me towards center stage, that way the people who are watching on Facebook Live will be able to see you. But right now
you can use your arrow keys.
Yep.
Am I there?
Not right now, you're still sitting in the chair.
Stand up. And See Daisy.
There we go. You're getting here now. All right, I see you. I'm gonna go away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Well, thanks to Ross and who spoke about IP rights, copyrights, and some privacy issues, and Walter spoke about evidence, and Gwendolyn just spoke about criminal activities within the metaverse. So I am going to not talk about anything pertaining to the law, so much so. I'll be speaking on NFTs and immersive and emerging tech within the metaverse. So by definition, NFT, which stands for non-fungible tokens, also referred to as NFTs, are based on blockchain tokens that each represent a unique asset, like a piece of art, digital content, or media. An NFT can be thought of as an irrevocable digital certificate of ownership and authenticity for a given asset, whether digital or physical. As compared to Bitcoin, which is a hot button topic right now, and I don't want to get into too much. I don't want to get too much into that, which is fungible, which means that it trades one for another, and you'll have the exact same thing. NFTs are part of the Ethereum blockchain, which keeps track of who is holding and trading NFTs. Blockchain is a way to store data without having to trust any one company or entity to keep things secure and accurate. Another major difference is that though both use the same blockchain technology, NFTs are not a type of currency. Each NFT is attached to a specific item. Now, some of the key characteristics of NFTs are that NFTs are designed to be cryptographically verified, unique or scarce, and they're easily transferable. And now, how can NFTs be used? I mean, we know of some of the the very popular use of NFTs, but I'll just name a few. So for example, there are digital collectibles, in-game items, credentialing, royalties, NFT event tickets, and also customer engagement. Now, so I just want to quickly define metaverse. I have a long definition of what the metaverse is, but I'll paraphrase this for you. The metaverse is basically made up of AR, which is augmented reality, VR, which is virtual reality, XR, which is extended reality, and MR, which is mixed reality. So that is what really comprises the metaverse. And then onto the next slide, please. Thank you. And NFTs are more than likely to become the preferred currency of the metaverse. Like I said, NFTs are on the blockchain. The blockchain is the language of the metaverse. Without blockchain tech to include smart contracts, there can be no transaction within the metaverse. So the preferred currency will allow owners of the NFTs to show ownership of property within this type of immersive technology, which is extremely important. Again, metaverse cannot exist without blockchain tech, can't exist without the NFTs, basically. That is the currency of the metaverse. As metaverse is being developed continuously, the role of NFTs will continue to emerge. But for now, both the metaverse and NFTs are in the early stages of development. So I'm going to list some characteristics of the metaverse. So for example, one of the major characteristics outside of NFTs is that there is a decentralized form of governance, also based obviously on blockchain tech and smart contracts. Metaverse viability relies on the tokenization of assets, which takes us right back to NFTs again. And they must be interoperable. It should be, and most NFTs are interoperable. So this provides flexibility. This means you can switch them in, switch them out. And then they also provide users with access to their digital avatars, which is very important. The replication of real-life identities through the NFTs. And again, all avatars are tokenized to prove ownership for the respective characters. So there's some regulatory difficulties with NFT supervision. So for example, the obvious one would be ownership and licensing issues. I mean, I know that the first speaker, Ross, kind of touched on copyright issues, but I'll go a little bit further to say that if there are any misunderstanding with these issues, for example, we could have litigation because both seller and buyer might not have understand that you're only granting certain rights to the users of the NFTs. So we can have some litigation there, and I'm pretty sure we will. In terms of IP rights, owners may face risks in the process of issuance and circulation from the point of view that the content does not have a valid license and may be liable for infringement. And there are also financial risks. So, for example, there are money laundering risks. And because NFTs that only represent a single unique assets and they have a single ownership, they're not securities. However, when NFTs involve finance or exhibit strong liquidity, they may be deemed securities and subject to securities law. Then there's also, like I said earlier, the anti-money laundering issues, and the U.S. Department of Treasury classified NFTs as an emerging online market and noted that the market could introduce new risks, including the risk of money laundering in the field of digital art, which is very, very, very popular right now. How can NFTs shape the future of the metaverse? So, for example, it can shape the future by being fair and transparent, which allows people or companies to hold real-world assets digitally in a decentralized space. The other big one is virtual real estate, so you can own property within the metaverse. And then there's also the next generation of social experience. For example, brands can use their NFTs to interact with targeted audience. That's my presentation. It was very short, but I could expound further, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think ultimately we'll get to a lot of that in the questions and answers because NFTs are very confusing to a whole lot of people. So actually, in the meantime, why don't you just stay here with me at the stage, and we will have the other presenters join us at the stage here as well. I'm going to pop everybody's slides back up as we go over sort of the process for doing Q&A. I'm also going to take the slide out of the picture-in-picture for the Facebook Live audience. And I'm trying to see who I don't see. I don't see Gwen. Actually, Gwen, do you mind actually walking over to the other side of Ross, and it'll be a little bit more visible on the camera shot right now? Be helpful. And I'm sorry, and yeah, Andrew, you can stay right where you're at. Or I'll actually move around you. But
I'm sorry, where would you like me?
next to Ross, over on the far side of the group over there. I get the joy of watching the camera shot here. So actually, here you can. Yep, there you go. But ultimately, what we'll do now is this is where we get to the live portion, the main event, I guess is what we'll say here, which is the Q&A. So I know it's fun. Like I'm actually watching what's happening live in the physical environment as I watch on the Facebook live stream as well. It's always fun to keep track of people moving around a virtual space and camera position. But we'll I always offer the way that we do the Q&A here again. So if you're live in the virtual space right now in VirBela, you will simply raise your hand. I will ask for those of you who are going to ask a question, please raise your hand. Keep your hand raised until I call on you, because what happens is I actually see the hands in the order in which they were raised. So if you have a question, I'll see that and I'll kind of keep track of who raised their hand in what order, and that way we can get to people. For those of you who are watching on the Facebook live stream, if you have a question, simply type it into chat, and I will read it into the room, so you guys do get the ability to essentially participate live with the event here. But the first question, I'm gonna kind of start ahead of time here. I'm gonna throw the first question out based on something that Ross had said during his presentation, which is about the concept of using someone else's trademark in my virtual world, because this is a question that I've always sort of had when it comes to trademark law, and just sort of knowing like what'll infringe on someone's trademark. Because I'm going to use Coca-Cola, who's actually one of our clients, as my example here. And, I know that they are very protective of their brand. But the concept is, okay, well, if I'm putting in my virtual environment, you mentioned this, I'm putting a Coca-Cola can in my virtual environment. And I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm using that virtual Coca-Cola can to actually represent Coca-Cola. I'm not trying to take anything away from their brand. I'm actually trying to say, hey, you know what? In the physical world, there are pop cans. In the virtual world, there are pop cans. And I'm putting a Coca-Cola can in my virtual world. Is that a trademark infringement? Because I'm not trying to use the Coca-Cola trademark to represent something other than what that company actually is. I'm just doing a digital representation of it. So I'm trying to understand, is that a violation of trademark? Is that something that we would need to get permission for? Like, how do you see that as somebody who is developing virtual assets all the time? Is that something we need to be concerned about? How?
I think that it is. I think that we're in a place now where consumers are getting increasingly savvy and are very cognizant of the notion of product placement. And when they see a recognizable brand in film, when they hear it in music, when they play it and interact with it in video games, they make the mental leap that there might be some level of endorsement, some official brand affiliation. So when you're playing Last of Us Part 2 or your favorite game in AR or VR, if you see a Coca-Cola can, you might infer maybe Coca-Cola sponsored this. Maybe they paid to have their can there, because if it's not integral to the story, if it could just as easily be a Pepsi can, if it could be a Snapple, if it could be any beverage, why is it Coke? Maybe because Coke paid to have it there. And it's that inference that is marketable, and that, in addition to just good old-fashioned trademark law, makes it potentially a very large liability for a small developer. So I'm always cautioning my devs, my clients, whenever possible, when a brand is not integral to a narrative, when it's not integral to a storyline, when it's not mandatory, if it could be anything else, make it as nondescript as possible, because I'm seeing, a body of case law developing built off of trademark lawsuits that, even if they won't go the distance, even if they wouldn't, pass muster in a courtroom, even if you couldn't convince a jury of it, the threat of a lawsuit alone is enough money to tank most small independent projects. So it's one of those things where it's better to be safe than sorry. And, whether it's a Coke can or whether it's a yellow earth mover that, looks like a Caterpillar brand earth mover, or a helicopter that is identifiable as a Huey helicopter, hell, even if it's a particular firearm, all of these are trademark and design patent lawsuits that have been coming through the pipeline the last couple of years. So it's a very dicey place to be experimenting, and a very expensive one for those who don't have deep pockets.
All right, so Walter, it appears we have a question for you from Facebook, which I will try to read off. This is from Francis in Facebook. Stephen, I see your hand up. Please keep it up, and I'll get to you next. So Francis is asking, just kind of, based on one of the things that you had presented during your talk, the technology is getting to a point now, and it's improving to a point where, in theory, you could run the entire courtroom with both, the judge, the lawyers, the jury, and potentially the witnesses and everybody in a virtual courtroom, almost in the same way that you could do a virtual courtroom. And even with some of the technology that we have right now in terms of muting and unmuting and being able to control the conversation in an environment like VirBela here, you could have those same types of controls for a virtual court. So how do you sort of see, what's your opinion in the future court in terms of, like, are there ways that would be beneficial to completely running a trial within a virtual environment versus physical? And do you think that would actually ultimately be something that maybe a defendant could choose to run it virtually versus physically? That there would be advantages or disadvantages to doing so, or an argument between the lawyers as to which venue, physical or virtual?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great and very full question. So I'll hit it in a couple of ways. So I think, generally speaking, and I'm going to speak from the point of view of the American legal system and, general principles of federal law. that are generally going to apply. So in a criminal trial, for example, you have what's called a right of confrontation. You have the right to confront and cross-examine the witnesses against you. And that basically is explained to people as the right to see them and to hear them and see what they have to say and have a finder of fact, a jury, weigh their credibility. And so I think that it's possible, but I think that in order for it to really exist, I think that the technology is going to have to improve to the point where the experience is relatively seamless, where things like the nuances of facial expression and eye tracking and how a person may shift in their seat, where things like that are able to come through. I think it's entirely possible we'll get to that point. I don't think we're quite there yet. Now, on the other hand, maybe in, say, a civil trial, maybe the parties will want to stipulate to do a trial in a virtual environment. Maybe there are reasons that it makes sense. So I think it's going to be a case-by-case thing. I think, generally speaking, one thing that's going to be very important is the level of technology and how closely you can kind of depict people and their demeanor. Something, though, that I've thought about quite a bit, especially as a criminal defense attorney, there are lots of stereotypes and biases that exist in the world, and I've often thought, wouldn't it be interesting if, for example, somebody could go to trial with an appearance that was other than their appearance, to try to defeat that type of stereotype, or to try to defeat that basically detriment of the doubt that they might get because they're in an underrepresented minority or what have you. Now, that's really very out there, and I don't know if we're looking at anything like that anytime soon. However, I think what I'm saying is if the technology does get there, there may very well be advantages to virtual trial, and it may very well let us control for things that we couldn't otherwise control for.
Right. Just because you touched a little bit on the concept of the identity and changing the identity, I was going to see if Gwen wanted to chime in on that a little bit, because she did speak to that.
I'm sorry, chime in about identity of an accused?
Yeah, like the concept of being able to, being able to change things about yourself that would potentially be, in another circumstance, potentially prejudicial.
That's an interesting thought. I haven't thought about that before. I think that as real as you can keep it to the real person, the real scene, make it authentic. I think people want authenticity. And when you start changing things around and adapting and putting on false personas and all this, I think you're tampering with the true character of a person, which is vital in any type of trial. So I would, at first blush, say no to that. But if you can keep it, on the other hand, if you can keep it authentic and true to character and form, then why not?
I'll hit on that a little bit later, because there were a couple of things that you brought up that I definitely wanted to ask questions about. But I do want to get to the room. So, Stephen, I know you've been patiently waiting. You want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah. It's nice to see all of you, and it's nice to see Matthew again. I remember the old days when we were actually in person in Chicago, and I welcome the return of those face-to-face interactions. I will certainly be there next month. I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to ask a question regarding what's interesting about all this is, how does the law that is applied in the real world, how does that fit into the metaverse? I mean, these are fascinating questions. I'd like to ask you specifically about tort law. How do you all see tort law, which is governing civil wrongs, personal injuries, property damage, harm caused by another, emotional distress, that kind of thing? How do you see that fitting into the metaverse?
I'm going to go with Gwen. I think that one kind of falls pretty squarely into what you were presenting.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. again, a lot of these wrongs in our real world touch upon the fact that you've got a real body and you have a real injury. Okay. So for an assault and battery, somebody actually has been hit and they've been injured and they were arrested, right? In a civil thing, if you have a car accident, somebody's been hit and potentially injured. Those same type of principles are not going to apply in the metaverse in the traditional sense, unless as far as I see it, is unless you get into areas of injuries caused by headsets, right? Manufacturer or the design element has gone astray, or people are bumping into each other, causing injuries. Those are real injuries that I think can be compensated for in the metaverse, but you actually have to have the physical touching as far as I see, as far as a tort concerned.
Can I ask, I mean, just about, doesn't tort also cover emotional distress? I can certainly imagine that happening in terms of people interacting in the metaverse.
Well, it depends on what jurisdiction you're in. Normally, you have to have a physical touching in order for emotional distress. Distress then can attach to it as an additional damage. But just having emotional distress in and of itself in some jurisdictions is not enough to rise to a level of any type of action.
Well, so let me throw a scenario at you, and it's actually it is a scenario that actually took place at this event. Several months ago, we were doing an event. Much like this one, there were a lot more people in the room outside. We had probably about 40 or 50 people in the audience. We had 4 presenters on stage. And what was taking place at that time was there was a little bit of a trolling incident taking place across VirBela in general, where we had, there were basically users that were kind of abusing the platform and they were coming, they actually affected our environment. So we have this event. We've been doing this event for several years. There's definitely some brand recognition around the event. There's some value to the event. We definitely assign, financial value to what we do here. And we had basically an avatar that would come into the room, basically start screaming a bunch of vulgar language and run up to the avatars and try to sort of abuse them. Ultimately we used the technology platform to basically boot the users as quickly as we could, but it was definitely an interruption of an event that was ongoing. We had one of our presenters actually, we spoke with later, who said that they were really distressed about what had happened and that they thought it was improper. And, they thanked us for kind of doing what we could to manage it at the time. But I guess the question then comes into play of, okay, well, this is a digital platform, but there was definitely people who were coming in with the intention of, causing essentially emotional harm to the other people who were in the space. Like that was their whole point for doing it. So I guess from a legal standpoint, what are the options there?
Well, I kind of touched that on my presentation. I think it's evolving. And right now what I see is that the platform themselves can very easily maybe create a code to flick off the person immediately. So you can stop the harm and further disruption, or the users themselves can have maybe de-escalate it by turning down the volume. But you raise a very valid point. How do you control bad actors? If you can figure out who they are, maybe you can kick them off the platform. And that's what we're talking about, suspension. Do you yourself have that right to suspend someone? Or do you want to put them into a VR court? How do you deal with bad actors? For now, I think probably the technology is there to flick them off the screen, turn down the volume, and I don't know really what other parameters you can set except to ban them. And then comes the question, are they going to have a right to appeal? Are they going to have a right to say anything in their defense? So again, it's evolving, and yes, rules should be set up, some kind of parameters to control bad actors.
Andrea, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on this conversation or if you had a question yourself, but I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here, and thanks, Gwendolyn, for that. I think right now how the metaverse works is let's say that there is a bad actor. Metaverse right now is void of good governance. Okay, there is not a good governance structure within the metaverse. So because it's decentralized, what happens is that the metaverse is governed by the communities. The community is made up of people like you and I. We are NFT owners, we are developers, we are our smart contracts are on the blockchain. So what happens is that we as a community, we vote to make the rules. We vote to say what goes, what's not good, and we have the ability to block someone who might be, you know, who we think may have committed, you know, something that is not, you know, I don't want to say. I don't want to use the word crime or assault or who would have committed an assault, but let's just say if any person with an avatar does something that another member doesn't like, then the community as a whole can either suspend the person or they could whatever. So what's happening is that we need proper governance. Until we have that, we're going to have these questions lingering because there are no rules, there are no regulations, and then the government can't overreach into metaverse, and they haven't yet overreached into metaverse. Other than to say that there was a case in England with someone called Lavinia. Someone stole her NFT, and the court said that an NFT is property, and that she had a right to get her property back. Outside of that, we haven't seen much of what should really happen, and that's because there is not a good governance structure. So I just wanted to jump in to say that.
Gotcha. I'm seeing Patricia saying that VirBela is being very laggy on her side, but she wants to say thanks. That was just a comment from Facebook that I'll read into the room so you guys can hear it. Andre, you can put your hand down, please. Actually, also. Do we have any other questions in the room at the moment? I want to raise their hand and venture a question. If not, I have a couple more that I can definitely throw in based on the conversations. Because, we definitely, there was another point, I'll wait, while we're waiting for someone else to put up their hand, there was a point that you just kind of brought up there, Gwen, when you were talking about this. I'm kind of curious to get Ross's take on this too, which is the concept of, okay, well, what's the jurisdiction? So if I, let's say, I'll throw the hypothetical situation of saying, you know what, we were hosting a professional event here. There was somebody who came in. They came in to intentionally disrupt it. We know we have tie back because thankfully VirBela does keep records and we can tie things back to who was actually doing this in the physical world. And so we know the physical world person that was actually committing this bad act. And now I'm going to say, okay, well, I want to go after them, legally. Say if we think that they damaged our brand, we think that we have a legal case against them, that they were doing it intentionally, they were doing it to cause harm. And so we want to file suit against them. The question then comes up, okay, well, where do we file suit? Who has jurisdiction over that? If they are, we'll get beyond the complexities that they live in another country potentially, but say let's say that we know that they live in the United States, we know exactly who they are. We have IP tracking, so we can tell, exactly what user account it was. It's tied back to a credit card potentially. So we definitely have identification as to this person was the bad actor. But I guess what's the jurisdiction? Is it where VRAR Chicago exists? Is it VirBela because that's where the technology platform technically lives, or is it where that person lives? How would we, I guess hypothetically, I'm gonna throw this one to you, Ross, first. Hypothetically, if we were saying, hey, we want to sue somebody for essentially damaging our brand based on what happened in a metaverse type event, how would that play out? What would your thoughts be?
Well, what you're describing is a nightmare scenario, and this is one of the most difficult things about any form of litigation over digital issues, because I've had this affect clients of mine in the esports world or influencer spaces where they're just trying to conduct business. They're just trying to live online like all of us, whether they're live streaming or competing competitively. And I've had clients who have had to deal with the virtual equivalents of sexual harassment, doxing, swatting, or real world harm. And it is an absolute nightmare trying to enforce any kind of justice, any kind of safety in those scenarios. I've had situations where I've had clients participating in esports tournaments who are public figures who are well known, who have had folks come to their house and cut their internet connection outside at the power box in their apartment buildings, and calling that into local police has not yielded positive results. We put in calls to local law enforcement and said we've just had someone cut the power, cut internet lines for a professional gamer in the middle of a tournament that has hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, and we want to press full charges. And the response from local law enforcement is, so? It's literally been like, that's not a big deal. Just log off Twitter. Just log off Facebook. You don't need to be playing video games. That's not a crime. Well, what about the damages to my house? Oh, small claims court. What's the actual value of a coax cable? So one is just overcoming an institutional bias of getting law enforcement or proper persons to care, first of all. And then second of all, navigating a legal bramble bush of that can be just as difficult, because you can invoke jurisdiction in multiple places. Where was the crime actually committed? Well, where the person was made a victim, it was certainly committed there. And then depending on long arm statutes, you might be able to pull in other jurisdictions for where the person who committed the crime actually is, getting subject matter jurisdiction or personal jurisdiction over them. And then also, depending on what's actually transgressed here, you might be able to apply state or federal laws. You might be able to get something removed to another jurisdiction. There's plenty of opportunities for forum shopping. So it's a complicated thing to answer. I wish that I had a short, snappy answer to say, here's how we solve that very real problem. But for the situation you described about people breaking into a space like this and shouting vulgarities or virtually harassing avatars, I think practically the way that you curtail that kind of behavior is it kind of rests with the platform and not traditional law enforcement. Whoever makes the sandbox gets to enforce the rules in that sandbox. So to anyone out there building VR environments, implement the tools to boot bad actors, to regulate bad actors, and for all of those policies and rules to be very transparent with your user base so that they know where their privacy begins and where their safety ends. I hope that helps. It's a very complicated issue, and there's a lot of ways I could take that answer.
I'm curious to see where that will go, but I know Walter also wanted to add on this one, so I'll let him go now.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Matt. And I'll preface this by saying, the practice of law, people often want to know, a right or wrong answer. They want to know, hey, listen, if I go to trial on this case, am I going to win? And obviously, it's a much more nuanced answer than that, right? Like, it's much more like the old story about the blind men that find the elephant, and one thinks that an elephant is like a tree trunk, and another one grabs the tail and thinks it's like a rope, and another one touches the side and thinks that it's like a wall. And the truth is, all of these answers are right. Everybody's got their own perspective. So, with respect to the example that Ross gave about someone cutting internet lines, I totally could imagine you call the local police. And to me, living here in California and here in the Bay Area where I practice, if that were to happen here, I feel as though I would expect that to be a pretty clear-cut case. I feel like if you called the local police and told them, hey, listen, here is a case, here's a vandalism case that is, ready-made and clear-cut, and you can, this is something you can prosecute. I would think that most prosecutors here would be interested in that, because ultimately one of the big goals of a prosecutor is going to be to close cases and get convictions. But that's not always going to be the case. Different jurisdictions are always going to have different enforcement priorities. And so as we kind of start to do business in this kind of global metaverse and in this kind of global, basically across the world, we're totally having to deal with now these additional issues that, just because we do something one way here doesn't mean that it's going to be the same way somewhere else. So, I think there's lots of opportunities to try to get creative, right? The example that was mentioned about some bad actors acting, a certain way in VirBela. I mean, negligent infliction of emotional distress, where basically you say, oh, well, they caused people distress and they should have known better. That's usually a pretty hard standard to meet. But there might be other arguments, like if there's an argument, say, that the presence of those bad actors interfered with the business, maybe there is a particular investor that you're hoping to close for a particular amount, but because they had that experience, they decide that they're not going to invest anymore. Maybe that's going to be the basis of your case. I think if anything, we have a really great opportunity right now because we're asking a lot of novel questions. And so it's easy to say, oh, well, we're not sure what's going to happen because we don't have a precedent for this, we don't have a precedent for that. But sooner or later, we're going to have to ask these questions. And so to the extent that we're going to have to ask these questions anyway, I think that there's great value in doing the best that we can to try to get creative with the cause of action, try to get creative with a precedent that can maybe be on point for a new case. Ultimately, somebody's going to have to do it, and who better than us that are in the space and interested in the space and willing to really think critically about how all of these issues break down.
Yeah, and I mean, to jump on that, I see a couple of questions in the room, but I wanted to get Andrea's take on what you guys have both just said, because ultimately, you can say, hey, listen, it's if somebody came into my physical event at 1871 and was disruptive like that and running up to people and screaming in their face, there's obviously a physical cause of action there. Aside from the fact that I could probably have them arrested for trespassing, we could also potentially, file suit again because they were trespassing, they were intentionally inflicting emotional distress. But to get Andrea's take on this too. So, well, the concept is that, hey, if I walk into this virtual space here and I steal, some of the digital assets that exist in this space. Okay, well, they're just digital assets. They don't really exist. Is it the platform's responsibility to enforce that law? Because Andrea had said that I guess a UK court currently ruled that somebody's digital property is in fact their digital property. It doesn't necessarily matter what platform it lives on. So, I guess the same concept there. If an avatar came into a space like this, and let's say we were as part of our event here doing a charity fundraiser or a giveaway of digital assets, but someone came in and stole some of those digital assets. Where I guess the question then is, sooner or later this case law is going to have to come about. Now, obviously, with NFTs, there's the ability to track who actually has sort of possession of it, or at least what account has possession of it. I'll let you chime in and answer that one, Andrea, what your thoughts are, in terms of how to track the ownership or how you can potentially reverse that if necessary. But then I'm also kind of curious what the legal standing of that would be. So any thoughts on Andrea?
I'm here. So that's a loaded question. Definitely, for sure. So long as an NFT is traceable because it's on the blockchain, that's number one. All NFTs are traceable. There's a decentralized form of governance. Everything is opened. Most NFTs are very, 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 very transparent, and therein lies the problem. So you could trace who has your NFT for sure. What happened in the case in England was, first, in my mind, the judge had to identify whether an NFT within the virtual space is considered property. And if it's considered property, who is the right owner? So I could see that this is going to start happening in the US jurisdiction. I could see that the judges will have to decide whether a virtual asset is considered property, and if so, who is the rightful owner, and that is usually 95% traceable. And then the next question is whether or not the assets that were stolen should be either given back or how does that look? I know that a lot of the NFT developers, they don't like this sort of overreaching by the courts, because what they're saying is that, look, metaverse is a space for us. Metaverse is decentralized. We want to control everything. But whilst I agree with that theory and that notion, I also have to look at the side of the owners of these assets and say, look, if I bought my NFT, whether it's for $1 or $2, and you steal it, it's rightfully mine, and I should have recourse to the law. Now, again, as I said earlier, the metaverse, as we know it right now, there is no proper governance. There are no proper rules and regulations other than the community rules. So until we get to that, we are going to see a lot of criminal activities. They're not going to go, they remain unpunished, of course, because there's no real had law or had governance structure in place. So I don't want to presuppose anything, because I'll just be speculating at best. But these are things that are going to happen, and they're going to happen very soon if Web3 is to kick off, because obviously Metaverse will live in Web3 and will live on the blockchain tech via smart contracts. So until it's developed further, and it is evolving, it keeps evolving every day, every second it evolves, we're going to hear cries for, we need the government needs jurisdiction within the metaverse. Because what if you do sexually assault me? What if you steal my avatar? What if you do something to my family member? What if you hit my pet? What if you steal my property? What happens? And these are questions that are being asked right now. As a matter of fact, what if you are located in England and you stole my stuff in the US? Or what if you're in the Caribbean? What if you're in Africa? How does the law look? How does it work? Are we going to have extradition requests? Are we going to amend treaties to say that, look, we are going to overreach into metaverse. So if you are in the UK and you commit a crime in the US, we have extended the extradition treaty to include the digital atmosphere or the digital space. So these are things that I think we're going to have to think about sooner rather than later. And it's evolving. So yeah, that's what I want to say on that.
We have a couple more questions. We have a couple more minutes. So I want to get to Steven. I saw Sophia had your hand up for a second there too.
Yeah, just really quick. If you don't mind me asking real quick, it's just an extension of what was just being talked about. What is the difference? Right. I guess we could talk about what's going on currently in the web and Web 2 to kind of make inferences for how this can be applied to Web 3 in the metaverse. But if, let's say, a person versus an entity or a business, commits some kind of crime against you, how is that currently handled? Because I think we should probably start there before we, so we can have some kind of baseline understanding, or us consumers can have a baseline understanding of how that's being handled now, to know how that could potentially convert and translate to the metaverse.
So
I guess consumers and then entities.
Matt, I would take a stab at that one if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
So I think that's a really great question, and I think in exploring that, we'll actually start to see some of the difficulties that are going to be inherent. So let's say that we're talking about, outside the metaverse. Let's say that somebody assaults you. Let's make it easy. Let's say that this is a person that is known to you, and so you're able to positively identify them. Generally speaking, that person's going to make a police report. He's going to tell the police, this is what happened to me. I was assaulted, and I was assaulted in this fashion. And, we're not going to mess with any identity issues here. The person that assaulted me is known to me. It's this person, and this is where he stays. And then ostensibly the police will go and arrest that person. And then a case will be filed against that person, presuming that a district attorney thinks that there's enough evidence there to do it. And then from there, they will make that person go to court and deal with the case. Now, let's translate that over to the metaverse, and let's say that the same thing happens. Let's say that you're in a shared metaverse experience. Let's say that somebody comes over to you and physically assaults, virtually, let's say, assaults your avatar, perhaps has, vulgar language for you, and you can hear their voice, all of this. Now, right there, at least from an evidentiary standpoint, you're going to have potentially a problem, which is how do you identify this person with particularity? And yeah, sure, we might be able to get their IP address. And
Hey, Walter?
yeah, sure. Tell me.
Sorry, let me pause you. Let's throw the circumstance like you just had it though. Let's say this is somebody who's known to me. I know that this is the person because I know who they are. I know who their avatar is, so I can identify their voice. I know that it's them. And on top of that, to throw it one step further, because I have a guess as to where you're going. Let's say that I've actually managed to record the transaction. So I recorded what they did. So again, sort of throwing an apples to apples comparison of somebody in a virtual space, but somebody that is known to me, somebody that I can identify who that person is in the physical world. How would I proceed?
Unless it's a deep fake, right?
Well, honestly,
Well,
I'm still gonna say, Matt, that that's potentially gonna be a dicey case. I'm not saying that it's not possible, and it may very well be that there's a prosecutor that's prepared to do it. And so what that case would turn upon then would basically be your testimony about how you're familiar with this person's voice. You know this person's voice. You've heard it before. You can identify this person's voice. When the thing happened to you, the voice that you heard matched this person's voice. And maybe they also said some things that seemed to indicate that this was the person that you're familiar with. Like, Matt, I'm doing this because of that time at band camp, or whatever the case may happen to be. Now, even in that scenario, I can still think of some holes to poke as a defense attorney, like, well, who else has access to your headset? Who else might have issue with you, Matt, over the thing at band camp? Is there any, I'm gonna basically try to explore all the logical inferences that apply in the situation. And at the end of the day, you're talking about something that is, in the example that's presented, something that comes down to identifying voice exemplars versus something that a person may have witnessed with their actual physical eyes. Now, and I'm not saying, again, that it's not possible. I'm saying that when you have to work with the standards of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, that might be a case that a prosecutor might be reluctant to bring because there might be a chance that they might not win.
Hey, if I could chime in for a moment.
Please.
It's not going to fly. There's no assault in metaverse. Assault is an actual physical touching of a real person. An avatar is not a real person. There can be no assault. I'm not saying that maybe in the
Doesn't have
future
to be,
there'll be
though. If
legislation.
I pump my fist at someone and the apprehension of being hit makes someone flinch and fall over, that's an assault. Can that
There's no
happen in the
live
metaverse
body.
as well?
No,
All right,
there's no-
hang on.
I disagree. There's no live. You have to have a real person. I mean, that's the whole basis of the assault and battery law. You're protecting a person from actual physical harm. And avatars are made up,
But to my example of, if I pump my fist at someone in real life and the apprehension of being struck causes them to fall over, to slip and
Sure,
fall
that's
and
real
create
life.
bodily injury, well, what if my avatar makes someone else's avatar, makes them fall out of their chair?
Doesn't matter.
Why should the
It's an
medium matter?
avatar. It's an avatar.
But do you
So I'm
understand that
gonna
what I'm getting at is if their
Well,
real world
there's
person
no
falls
precedent.
over because of an apprehension in
Hang
a
on,
virtual space?
Well, there's no precedent
Before we
for that,
get
which is
before
really
we get
interesting.
before we start arguing on the stage, we'll definitely leave this open for the Q&A or for the open networking. Interesting conversation though. But I know Steven's had his hand up very patiently. I wanted to get to his question. Tom actually had a really good question that I'm kind of curious about also, but we'll go to Steven first, and then hopefully end Tom's question. Steven, you want to go?
Well, I mean, I just think that this whole notion that, well, you have to have a physical presence and that, that assault and battery or tort doesn't count in the virtual world. I mean, that's a real problem. I mean, people
Well,
are complaining about sexual assault in Meta's horizons. I mean, there's all kinds of issues. If the law doesn't apply, then we're in the Wild West. I think this whole thing, this whole discussion points up the terrible issues that we're in now, that we don't have regulation, that we don't have law that pertains because the law is designed for the physical world. Well, we're going to be living more and more in the virtual world. We need to figure out how we can apply the law toward or wherever it may be in the virtual world, because if we say it doesn't apply, we're in real trouble.
well, and to your point, you could say that this is an extension of cyberbullying. So, if you're bullying somebody on Facebook, if you're bullying their account, well, hey, you're not physically going out there and bullying somebody. You're not physically there threatening them, but there's definitely been case law now where people
It
are being
still
prosecuted for
counts.
exactly.
It's still bullying. No, I mean, that's the point. We're living in a virtual world. We're going to be living more and more in a virtual world. Believe me, the metaverse is going to be more and more important, and we're going to be in there more and more. We need to figure out a way of, yes, we have to apply the law. We can't have a physical presence or that law is completely useless. But there is still harm, there's still tort, there's still abuse of all kinds in the metaverse and in virtual worlds. It's happening all the time.
All right, and thank you for that, Stephen. I'm going to ask you to kind of hold the rest of this until we get to the unstructured networking that will happen, because frankly, Tom threw an interesting question in the chat. Tom, I'm going to let you ask that one real fast. I'm going to get everyone up here sort of opinion on it, just really briefly if we can, because we are running up on the end of time here, and then we'll leave the rest for some open conversation and do some closing notes. So Tom, do you want to ask that one?
Yeah, just to kind of to branch it off of what we were just talking about, I am noticing as new to kind of virtual reality and immersive tech in general, I've been noticing that more and newer content is creating stricter and more thoughtful protocols to navigate some of the harassment issues that you all are talking about. So I think a lot of it, as Andrea was saying, is going to be socially kind of constructed that we sign off to. As we join the platforms, which then gives protocols for kicking us out and all that kind of jazz. But my question is it possible for someone creating an application, at least, as you're signing up and you're clicking the agreements, Ross, kind of what you were saying at the beginning, a number of folks have touched on it, can you embed within that user agreement saying, this program or this software was created in the United States and is abiding by the US law, and by signing this agreement, you're agreeing to laws that are regulated in the US?
So jurisdictionally, and I'll take it a step further. Jurisdictionally, let's say I've created a virtual environment and I'm basically putting in my user agreement that if you come into this platform, you are agreeing to be bound by the laws of the United States and Illinois and Chicago. And therefore, if Chicago happens to pass an online harassment law, in theory, could a user theoretically kind of sign to the fact that they are now prosecutable because they've gone into a virtual space and done something like that? Is that something? So I'm going to throw that one kind of across all three lawyers really quickly and just get their opinions. Start with Ross.
Well,
Sorry,
is
I
not
was
gonna unmute himself.
unmuted there. Given that I'm a transactional attorney, I'm going to waive my time for the others who have more experience with criminal law.
All right.
well, that would definitely be Gwen. But let me ask a question. So where is the user based? Is the user based in Chicago, or is the user based in Timbuktu? Is the user based in another state?
Let's say
That's easy.
Timbuktu.
Let's say so that's a real problem, because if I am not based in the US and I click on a user agreement that says I agree to be prosecuted in the USA, we are now tethering on extradition laws. And will a jurisdiction, an outside jurisdiction, say, okay, you know what? The attorney general from Chicago wants to get a citizen of country X in Timbuktu to be extradited to face a lawsuit for harassment within the metaverse, I find that highly unlikely. And I don't go ahead, sorry.
Sorry to cut you off, Andrea, but without getting into, obviously international treaties, that's going to be tricky, but even, I guess within U.S. law, because, I've got a couple U.S. lawyers here. So I'll throw that, again, just really quickly on your opinion, Walter and Gwendolyn. What are your thoughts on that? Is it possible for me to kind of say in the user agreement that you're agreeing to be bound? That's the kind of stuff that we have. I know on our SaaS platforms, like my user agreement, my end user license agreement says you agree to be bound by, arbitration or this law or that law if you're using our platform. Is that, do you think, in your opinion, does something like that translate to metaverse type user agreements?
From my perspective, I think you can put whatever you want in your user agreement. I think enforcement is a completely different can of worms, but it's a contract. So why can't you put whatever terms you want and control the jurisdiction in whatever state that you want? Enforcement or pulling somebody in is completely different from having a user agreement where people have to say, yes, I agree, to a certain jurisdiction.
Walter?
Yeah, I'm going to generally agree with Gwendolyn, and I'm also going to add to it a little bit. So, we get these end user license agreements all the time, and we kind of read through and then we click, and we don't necessarily know what we've clicked. And then that is technically a binding contract where you're saying, okay, if you are clicking this thing and you're going to use this product, then you're agreeing to use it under these terms. I don't think, however, that it's going to be, I think there's a limit to it. Like, for example, can you say, okay, if you're going to use this, then you agree to be bound by the laws of Delaware or whatever for the purpose of litigation? Okay, sure. But then could you also add a clause that would say, and then you further agree that you're going to admit all liability to whatever it is that we accuse you of, and you're going to foot the bills for yourself to come fly to our state and be sued, and also we get to punch you? I mean, sure, you can put that in the contract, but there's going to be a point at some point where a court says to you, well, listen, no, you can't enforce that, or no, that clause would even be unconscionable in this context where you've slipped this in here into this thing that nobody's even going to read. Now, where is that line? I'm not sure exactly. I'd be very curious to know if there's a case on point. Want to jump back also to one last thing, which is we're talking about cyberbullying statutes and that sort of thing. I mean, it's just at the end of the day going to come down to the laws that are on the books and whether there is actually a viable argument that the conduct that we're talking about fits into those laws or fits into the legal scheme in a reasonable enough way that we can make it work.
So I think we'll end with the final note of basically saying that clearly there is a lot still to be determined. The law is definitely going to have a whole lot of catching up to do. This technology is obviously marching forward at a pretty fast pace, and the law is definitely not so far keeping up with it. But I do want to, again, in the interest of time, because we always want to keep this programming on the rails, I will say thank you to our presenters here. I hope you guys can stick around and actually continue some of the conversations that started up here in the open networking. What is going to happen now, just so you in the audience are aware, is I'm going to, in a few moments, we're going to end the official program. I'm going to turn off the live stream, but everybody in the environment is welcome to stay in the environment and continue their conversations. If you do have any individual questions that you did not want to ask publicly, you're welcome to do so privately for the people who are in the room. What will happen is in a few moments, I'm going to, actually I'll do it right now. I'm going to make all the chairs that you are sitting out in the audience go away. And then what will happen is you will see on the floor in the very near future, you'll see these little blue circles up here. Those are called private volumes. The way that they work is if you are standing inside one of those circles, you'll be able to hear and speak to only the people who are inside the circle with you. And for the people who are outside the circles, essentially you'll only be able to talk to the people who are outside the circles. But with that, I want to once again say thank you to our presenters. So thank you, Gwendolyn and Andrea and Ross and Walter. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for those of you who are watching on the Facebook live stream and have asked and commented on your questions. So Francis, Patrick, Jay, I apologize if I'm missing some of you over there as well, Eric. And Leslie, but thank you again for joining us. We hope to see many of you in person next month at 1871. And again, we'll be sharing more details about how that event is going to program going forward. But in just a moment, I'm going to end the live stream. So thanks again for those of you who are joining us on Facebook. And what I will do in the very immediate future is I will turn on the private volumes for those of you in the audience. So essentially, if you're in the audience and everything goes quiet all of a sudden, it's probably because you're in a private volume. Turn those on right now. And I'm going to end the live stream. I see the still frame go.